Okay, so today's agenda, as Tracy mentioned, the last webinar was for basic Crystal reports. So I'm going to go over just briefly what we did, and then I'm going to cover a few advanced topics. This will not go crazy advanced. I would say, kind of intermediate level, just to kind of continue with what we did from the basic session. So we'll look at some formulas, grouping, tokens and what they are in a report, and then we'll edit a layout and we'll save a layout back into SAP, test it, and then I'll just talk about my general Crystal Reports learning philosophy. So let's jump in there. So previously we worked on a couple of simple Crystal reports. The first one was a customer list. So if you would like that session, again, as Tracy mentioned, you can get that one. But we built a basic customer list. We pulled some information into Crystal Reports. Then we built an order list and just added a few of these columns and a total. We then added a parameter, and we saved this into SAP. And we tested it there. So I'm going to use this file that I used last time, and I'm going to base what I'm doing today on that. So as you remember from last session, you would use SAP Crystal Reports for SAP Business One. If you don't have this, we can provide this for you and give you the right version. It comes with your maintenance of SAP Business One, so you get a license for this for free, and we do want to encourage you to use it. It's a really great way to improve your business intelligence, make your business smarter, and get reports that you need. Especially Crystal Reports is really great with management reports. So yeah, we encourage you to try, and that's why we have these sessions. So here we go. So Crystal Reports, we're going to either push F5 or I'm going to push refresh here. I have to log in. So you will need to enter your SQL your SQL SA password, and you're going to see what we had last time here. So this is a pretty basic list. What I'm going to do is refresh again, pushing F5, and what you're going to see is it'll just say use your current parameters or prompt you for new ones. So what I want to do is make my range just a little bit wider, just to show a little bit more information there. So you can see now we have much more information, and this is just sorted kind of in order here, and it's all mixed up. So today we're going to format it a little bit, and we're going to do a formula and add a token to filter this a little. So the first thing that I wanted to do is talk about the formula for the doc total. So if you look at the document total, this doc total column, in SAP, you're going to see that this is the final total for the document. So a lot of the times I'll get a request where people don't want the document total after everything. They want the subtotal. So the thing is, that's not stored in SAP. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a formula that gives you the subtotal. So to make a formula, you need this field explorer. You should always have this one up. I don't generally use this one. This is like I think called a navigator. Usually I'll just turn that off. Preview panel. You don't really need that. You probably want the width in the screen, but you always need this field explorer. This has all of your elements over here. So what we're going to do is right-click formula and click new. Give it a name, so we'll just call it subtotal, kind of keep it in the same style as the SAP column name. And you're going to see here that you have a formula window box, and there is so much to learn about these formulas and so many functions you can do from date ranges. There's a lot of different things in here that you can use and look up. I'm going to keep it pretty simple today. I mean, you can just use your regular kind of addition and multiplication and division options, and there are a lot of things very similar to other programming languages and handling different things, and it can get very complex. There are global variables you can pass. There are local variables. There are if statements, case statements, and all that stuff. Today, we're not going to do a lot about that. We are just going to basically write this formula to take the order, add the discount back, add the down payment back in, subtract your expenses, and subtract out your tax. So I just pasted this just to save time. And so you would go through and you can basically just go into here. And because I have ORDR, I can just take the doc total, double click, and just write this and use these fields. So this is saying, again, take the doc total, add, and I'm just using regular operators here in order to get me the subtotal of the document. So I can check it here, run a little check. It'll validate it, and you saw me do that before. It's an automatic thing. It'll check for errors. It doesn't want there to be any errors. You can continue if there are errors, but you want to address them. It's very rare that you would want to continue with errors there. So just click save and close. So this is, I mean, kind of when people start, they're going to say, okay, well, I want the subtotal, and then maybe they're going to add the rows into the report, and that could be a way to do it, but you'd see that if you did the rows, it's going to want to output one row per sales order row. So, you know, when you do that, I think the biggest difficulty people have in understanding Crystal Reports is like the grouping, where if you are returning multiple rows or you join a table in a certain way, you get this kind of multiplication factor of, you know, oh, well, I have this order, but then I have 15 of that particular order. Well, maybe you linked your sales employee wrong and you have 15 sales employees. So that's kind of one of those ones where you need to watch out in your database expert and make sure that your linking is done correctly. So it's something that takes experience. It's hard to cover in a short tutorial like this, but just keep that in mind. So I'm back into design view. You can remember the design view and the preview view. So I click back into design. It's a lot easier to work in this view when you're doing when you're editing the report. And I'm going to right click or left click here and drag this in. Make it a little bit wider and align it here and go back to preview. So you can see now you've stripped out all those other things you don't want. You probably don't want tax. You probably don't want any of those other things there. So that's easy as that. So next thing we want to do is give this a little bit more context by customer. So after we've built kind of the data that we want, we now want to turn this into a more of a management report. Right now, this output is very similar to what Excel would give you, more of an ad hoc or tabular type of data. So we want to turn this more into a management report, make it easier for a human to read. But at that point, we are adding what's called horizontal data. So you have right now purely vertical data. So this is what you're familiar with, Excel. And you've probably had a scenario where you've mixed vertical and horizontal data together with something like a subtotal, and that is somewhat difficult to deal with in Excel, and I'll show you that in a second here. So let's group these, and I'm going to group them by the customer. So we go to Report, Group Expert, and you can see that it already suggests the fields that are on the report, so this is easy. Double click, and I'm going to group by the name of the customer. Okay, so this goes through and automatically groups by the customer, and then you can see all of the individual orders beneath that particular customer. And again, it makes it a little bit easier for a human to read it. And now I'm going to make it a little bit even more easy to read and apply a couple of best practices that I like to do. So I go back to design mode. I don't like to leave this in the page header, the labels. I like to put it in the group header. So I'm going to go to section expert. Sorry, I zoomed through that too quick. Report in section expert. From the group header, I'm going to insert a new section, and then I'm just going to move that section up. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these labels and I'm going to bring them down here into the group header, and then I'm going to exchange them around here, and I'll show you why. So now you can see each customer is listed, and then the labels follow under this, and I think this makes it a little bit easier in context. Secondly, what I'll do is make a little bit of space, make this a little bit wider, format these up a little bit. You know, maybe we'll add a line from here, and we'll just go from here to there. I'll get rid of these underlined and I'll make them bold. So you can also rename these at this point. So you can say doc new, doc date, due date, and subtotal. Look back here, so you can see this is getting even a little bit better there. And I will add now a subtotal to the footer of the group so that I can see the total by customer. So in the details, you can see details here, details row. I'm going to right click, insert summary, and I'm going to put it at all levels because I wanted another one down at the footer, and then I want one in the group. But you could see you could do one manually to group one or to the group footer. In this case, I'm just going to save time, put it to both. For both of these, I want to make them a little bit wider, and let's go take a look at that. Okay, so you can see subtotal, and the subtotals there will be done for each customer. You can in here add, like, let's move this down a little bit. Let's move this down a little bit. What you could do is add a line in here. You could add a border to the top of that field. I don't tend to like to do that. You can do something like a line there. You can insert a text object here and just say, let's go subtotal. Total for. Then you could drag in the card name, make this a bit wider, right, align it. So you could see this will say total for ADA Technologies. Where's my row here? Make that a bit wider. So you could see then it'll give you kind of what the total is for. This is not necessarily useful, but just to show you if you want to do that, or you could just say total, group total, but it shows you here how the grouping works, brings things together. Okay, so another thing we're going to do is we're going to add a $sign, right click the subtotal, format the field, and display currency. You can also adjust the rounding options there. That adds a $sign. You can add the $sign here as well. You can leave the $sign off. You can conditionally do a $sign. You could do floating $signs, a lot of stuff in there as well. And with the groups, the group expert, you're going to want to adjust a couple of these options, and I'll talk about them in here too. So a common one, and something you're probably saying is, oh, it doesn't repeat the group header on each page. So if you look back here at my preview, you're going to see here, and you're going to see this. It's kind of out of context. I like to make each page stand alone as much as I can. So here, you think it's page 3, you have to go back to page 2 to see who the customer was. So to avoid that, reports, group expert, card name, options, repeat group header on each page. There's also the option for keep group together, and this will attempt to keep it together as much as possible. So if there's the opportunity for it to simply kind of page break and move over to the next page, it'll do its best to do that. I'm not going to do that right here, but I will do this to make it a little bit nicer looking, so you can see there it kind of cleans everything up. So just with a couple little things, you've made the report a little bit easier to read and use some kind of report best practices to kind of break things up with the eye. But now you can see the issue with this is if your goal is to output it to Excel, you have horizontal data and vertical data. So exporting this to Excel, at this point, it's not really designed for that. At this point, it's a management report. So if you want to just purely export it to Excel, you probably want to stick with your queries. So the last thing on this report that I want to do, I want to suppress the page header because it's making this little blank part there. So this I don't need anymore. I'm not going to do everything. Anything I want to do in the page header, I can do in the group repeating. If I do have a logo or something I want, I can put it there. But if not, section expert, page header, and suppress. And then that'll make that gap a little bit better. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about here on this report is there's this guide, and SAP uses a token system to communicate with SAP Business One. So by default, there's a lot of options in the parameters for Crystal Reports, but they don't necessarily translate properly into SAP. So SAP's kind of adapted it so that you can use some of these tokens, and it'll allow you to do things like make a selection drop down dynamically using an SQL query. So instead of having something where you are just kind of stuck saying, give me the whole list of customers, but then you want to find some way to filter it, you can actually use a special parameter token, and you can name it as, it'll be a long looking parameter, but it's extremely useful to be able to run it as an SQL query. I'm not going to dig into that much detail today, but this guide, how to work with Crystal Reports, and this is the 9.0 version, will give you a list of what you can do. You could do things like checkboxes and other things, and you can use some of the default SAP Business One controls as well. So you can add titles. If you have a lot of selection things, you can add separators, and it allows you to build kind of a selection criteria box very similar to what SAP is going to give you. So if you want this, I mean, this is a common one that you've seen here, business partner selection criteria. I'm going to use the customer one, and this is the code you want. So the trick here is to make a parameter, and the name of it needs to be what you're going to do. So we'll just say customer, and this is where you could actually put an SQL query, but this is a shortcut for a special token as described in that guide, where it just allows you to select customers in a similar way as SAP already does.
Hey, Mike, will you be able to send me that document that you just showed? Because I might, excuse me, I might share it with everybody when, for those who want the recording.
Sure.
Thanks.
I will send it. Okay, so I made my parameter. I'm going to set the parameter order. I'm just going to move it up. And then I'm going to go to report, selection, formulas, record, and I'm going to add another filter. And this I kind of did in the last session. So card code equals, and then we'll do this. And then we need an and, check it, and that's good. Okay, so now it's just want something here. So I always like to do the parameters last because of this. If you do a multi-selection parameter, then it's going to make you select that. It's going to be more dynamic in the actual report when we import it. But when you're doing it this way, like when you're testing, it's going to ask you to add those, so you probably want to just leave them off. Okay, so let's go into SAP, and we did this again in the last session. I'm going to speed up here a little bit. And so modules, administration, setup, general, report, and layout manager, click import. So again, we did cover this. Bring my order list, it's a report. I'm going to put it in the sales section, sales report by default. I'm going to override it. It's just called order list. So I can either go here, sales report, and order list. Select the customer. So you can see this token kind of converted it into what you would normally see, kind of this standard looking thing. So you push this ellipses button and we can just leave these, just leave it for all customer groups. And then we'll just do 01, 01, 01 to today. And you just run this and you can see that it pulls up everything there. As a note too, the tokens allow you to set these fields as clickable objects. So it's like a golden arrow. So there is, you can look through the token guide and look for the golden arrows or just ask us how to do it, but you can actually turn these into links. So you could click and have this dynamically open the order as well. You can use mixed documents for that as well. So that's all I'm gonna do for the order list. So that's a lot of options that you have there. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is editing orders very quick, or editing layouts very quickly. So we have a sales quote, we have a Crystal Reports layout that we've used here. So here's my quote layout. You're hopefully familiar with this layout designer. Click the pencil there. You see the one that's bold is the one that's default for your user. You're back at this report and layout manager and you can see it's still highlighted. So the way to get this out is clicking edit. And this edits out the Crystal report to a temporary file in your Windows temp directory. It pulls it actually out of the database and puts it there, and it opens up your Crystal Reports designer for you. So when you're working in here and you want to edit this, just remember that clicking File and Save does nothing but save the changes to the temporary file. So I'll show you to make sure that you use the save here from this Crystal Reports SAP Business One add-in, or save it to your desktop as a file. I don't know how many people learning Crystal Reports have asked me the same question. They say, I did a ton of work on a layout, I clicked save, and it didn't save anywhere. Well, the thing is, it did save somewhere. It saved it in your temp directory. So you can go digging through your temp directory if you want those changes back, or you can start again and just take it as a lesson and then either save it back into the database or save it onto your desktop. So today I'm going to just very simply talk about 2 points for editing this. For editing a layout. So this is this is a slightly modified version of the SAP default layouts that I use. So this looks pretty complicated, but as you're editing, you can actually just preview it and look at the sidebar and see what sections you're impacting. So we want to run a refresh, and then you have a doc key and an object ID. So if you're not very familiar with this, I've made a little query that will save a lot of time. So I save that in the query manager, Crystal Reports, doc entry, and object ID finder. I honestly use this because it just saves me time. I don't have to write a little query each time I want a number. So especially if I'm testing a weird scenario, I want to be able to quickly get the referenced information that I need. Because the document number does not always correspond to the database number. So right here, I run my query and then I just put in the document number. If there were more than one type, it would give you all of the types, and then you just pick the one that works for you. So you see this is a quote, document number. So we need to use the doc entry 357 and the object type 23. Okay, so this is my attempt to make it just simplify this. So if you looked in the database, there are 357 entries, but they don't all equal the doc entry. So this one, obviously you can see the doc entry series is slightly different. So keep that in mind. I don't know, I see maybe 9 out of 10 databases do have a differing numbering series than the doc entry. So I go back here, 357, 23. I enter my password again, and it just does a little check. These aren't errors. And then you'll see I'm in 100, okay? So this makes it easier to see, and I can look through and see what I want to edit, especially if I just want to change a label or I want to move something around. I do not recommend starting from scratch to do an invoice, no matter how, depending on the extent of the customization, the structure of the SAP document layouts provide a lot of things that are difficult to replicate manually. And I have tried it. I've customers that have tried it and I've supported them to do it. Much easier, even with quite a bit of modification. Start with the default SAP layouts. Okay, so preview this. What I'm going to do simply today is add a note to this, some terms. That's it. I don't want to get too complicated. So I'm going to go to group footer. I want to put this at the bottom of the group footer somewhere. So let's say past comments. I look at my section expert. I have a lot of things in here. I'm going to insert a new one. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here. I'm going to insert a text object. I already have some terms here that I copied off the internet. So this could be whatever you're looking for. Do a preview. So you can see here very quickly, you have this here. You can format this. This is Tahoma 10. You can make it bigger or smaller, format everything. I'm not going to do too much more on that. And then all you need to do is add-ins, save. And then you just hold here and it's going to go ahead and save that back into SAP, and then we'll take a look at it. So this will do its thing, operation successful here. Close this, close this, close this. Oops, I closed the one I wanted. And we'll print preview in here. And you can make these terms conditional by anything you want. This is just to show you a quick example of editing out a layout. Okay, so that is basically it for today. The last thing I want to talk about is my general Crystal Reports learning philosophy. A lot of people are going to come to me and ask to do a profit and loss statement comparing their budget to last year's year-to-date numbers, and they've never done Crystal Reports before. And that is unfortunately a recipe for failure. You need to work with it. There's a learning curve. The value that Forgestic provides, if you don't want to do the report yourself, is that we work on Crystal Reports all day, every day. And even though there's X amount of billing rate, we're going to do it 30 times faster than your learning curve. We want to support you, and we want to help you to get into Crystal Reports, and just make sure that you set reports that you can learn that are reasonable, and that you can kind of do one and then move on, and then that will support your learning curve. You can look up and troubleshoot and try things, and then work your way up to something like a profit and loss statement, which I would say is a 9 out of 10 level report. So don't try to set yourself up to just achieve X report. Start with something that's a little bit easier and work your way up and get some help or get some training, and we can help you out with that. So don't jump into the deep end of the pool immediately. So that's all that I have for you today. I'll pass it back to, well, actually, I'll ask if there's any quick questions.
Yeah, are there any questions? Just a second here. I'll just unmute everybody. All right, there you go. Are there any questions?
He said, yeah.
I think I unblocked everybody.
Yes, you did. I think so.
I did. Okay. Hi, how's it going?
I'm okay.
Okay, good. Go ahead for Mike.
No, I don't have a question. I think it's going to come when we actually try an example.
Okay.
Good. And you have your support, Mike. If you want to put up the, you guys use your support. It's there. You pay for it with your maintenance. So if you need help with anything, just send your email to the support desk.
Okay, and Jared, we'll get you that 9.0 guide. I'll send the 9.0 guide to Tracy, and she'll send it out.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, that's a good idea.
Hello?
Yeah. Okay, well, send it to me. I don't know who's talking there, but all right. So thanks, everyone. Our next break is in 2 weeks. We're going to be covering using data sets with Crystal Reports. So, and again, if anybody wants a copy of this, send me an email. I'm going to charge it up right now and send it out to whoever wants it. So thanks again, Mike. Thanks for everything.
Thank you, everybody.
Just a second, Mike. You got a question from Kevin. Hang on.
Can we get a copy of the Crystal Report doc entry and object finder? Yes, sir. I'll put that in a text file, and we'll send it out with the how to work with the 9.0.
You're going to send that for him, yeah?
Yeah, I'll give it to you in a text file. It's you just run it like a regular query.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye everybody.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.